All right, for those who've joined us on the webcast, welcome to Mobileye Investor Day. It's an opportunity where we can have a deep dive into Mobileye's strategy and their advantage in the marketplace. For those who are in the room, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a few announcements to make. The first is just a legal disclosure that we're going to read. Today's presentation contains forward-looking statements. All statements that are not historical facts are subject to a number of risks and uncertainties that our actual results may differ materially. Please refer to the most recent earnings release, 10Q and 10K, available on our website, intc.com, for more information on the risk factors that could cause actual results to differ. Again, so welcome back for those who are in the room. What I want to do first is just cover the afternoon agenda to let you know how the presentations will go. And then I'll hand it over to George Davis, our CFO. First, we'll go through about 30 minutes where George will talk about Intel's overall strategy and how Mobileye fits into that. And then we'll hand it over to Amnon, who will talk about basically Mobileye's overall strategy and basically our competitive advantage in the marketplace. We'll take a short break, and for those who are on the webcast, we'll let you know when that's coming. And after that, Erez Dagan will come back and talk about our mobility as a service opportunity. And at that point, what we'll do is we'll open it up for some Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentation, certainly let me know. For the most part, then, at the end, what we'll do is we'll hand out a mic, and you'll be able to ask real time while George and Amnon are back on stage. With that, I'll hand it over to George to begin.
All right, thank you very much. First off, let me add my welcome as well. For all of you here in Jerusalem, I know you've had quite a morning, and for those on the webcast, I'm sorry you couldn't be with us. One of the highlights of the day was to be able to take a drive in one of the Mobileye cars, and it's truly a unique experience. So if you get the sense of the energy in the room, it's because people are still thinking about the ride. All right, let me jump to a couple of thoughts. One of the things I want to do is you're going to hear a lot today about not only the Mobileye that you knew when we announced the deal, but really the Mobileye opportunities that are continuing to expand and what we're looking at as far as the potential of Mobileye. And if you go back to Investor Day, we use this strategy slide. And the point you're going to see throughout today is the very tight fit between Mobileye and Intel and where we're taking our strategy. Because a lot of times people simply think, well, isn't this just about ADAS? And I don't think of Intel as an ADAS company, but I think you're going to see pretty quickly that this is an important Internet of Things expansion opportunity for the company, which has long been a focus area. That when it comes to AI, this is one of the great use cases for AI, and it's being used in a way that's actually not only quite profitable, but generating design wins that will be coming into place for many years. So, and I think as we go through this strategy as well, I think you'll see the overlap. First off, make the world's best semiconductors. And really, semiconductors are so much more than just a CPU. It's all the different XPUs that we talk about. Increasingly, it's about a process and packaging. It's about software. It's about security, interconnect. All of these things are pillars that Intel is quite focused on and have a big role to play at Mobileye as well. We want to make sure that we invest in those opportunities that really are leading key inflections that are coming. And I would say it's very obvious that the autonomous age for autos is upon us. And I think you'll see from Amnon's presentation, the roadmap to how you participate in that is actually quite exciting and one that's been well thought through. And then you have be the leading end-to-end platform provider for the new data world. It's not just enough to have a basic chip to address an issue. You have to have a platform and all the elements of it so that you can provide customers real-time solutions that have the capability that they'll need. And that's very much the kind of the design parameters that we think about at Intel. And obviously, you're seeing that with the IQ and the work that's being done here. Finally, relentless focus on operational excellence and efficiency. One of the things that we've been spending a lot of time talking about is the focus that the company has on driving improvement every year in its process roadmap, in the range of products that we have to serve customers' needs. And also, I think if you have a little bit of sense for those here, you certainly have a sense about the operational excellence here at Mobileye. It's a very easy story to tell, and also in terms of the performance, we'll get into that a little bit. When I finished the ride, one of the participants here, as we got in the bus to come back to the site here, said to me, how do you feel about funding all of this activity? And I think there's this perception, because so many of these the companies involved in autonomous driving are running significant deficits. And what you'll see today is Mobileye is completely self-funding. And it's the team here has an extraordinary capacity, not only for great R&D, but they've been doing it within a design envelope that has kept pace with their growth. So yes, R&D is growing substantially here, but the revenue and operating margin of the business is also growing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide. This is another slide that you've probably seen on a regular basis, but the company is moving, Intel is moving from a PC-centric based revenue base and margin base to a data-centric. And when we talk about data-centric, the immediate read is obviously on the data center, but clearly networking is becoming a much bigger area for us. AI in general is becoming a bigger area for us. But the IoT group, which includes both Mobileye and our IoTG group, is a $5 billion a year business now for the company, and it's growing at strong double digits. So you're seeing already a significant move towards the data center, and we'll give you a little bit of the history here, or data-centric, I should say. If you look at Intel's revenue, which was $70.8 billion in 18, you've seen a compound growth rate where the data-centric elements, this is where Mobileye plays, is growing at a compound average growth rate of 14%, and PC-centric has been growing at 5%. And Mobileye has been certainly growing in the latter part of that, well above the 14%, has been an accretive participant in that. In Q3, which we just reported about 2 weeks ago, we reported a record quarter in the history of Intel. At the same time, we also reported a record data-centric quarter for the company, and this is really coming off of an extraordinary data-centric year in quarter in Q3 of 18. So the year-over-year comparison was quite difficult, but you can see the growth engines of the company are performing quite well. And it was also a record for Mobileye revenue, for our IoTG group revenue, for DCG revenue, and again, that's coming off an extraordinary quarter there, and also for memory. So these are significant and important growth businesses for the company. And it's one of the reasons why we're having this event today, because obviously we had our own, the company overall had an investor meeting in May of this year. But, the activities going on at Mobileye are so substantial and so differentiated in the space in which it's in. We felt like if we didn't give you an opportunity to get a little bit immersed in what's going here, you might miss just how significant the progress is that's taking place here. So here you see, just building on that track record, the growth of our IoT businesses. And this is one where, again, growing at greater than 15%. And when you put it into the 2019 framework, you'll see another. It will be additive to the 15%. And again, as I mentioned, we expect those businesses to be at about $5 billion for 2019. The other thing we're trying to do is make it easier for you to follow the progress of not only Mobileye, but what's going on in our IoT business. So you may have noticed in the financial statements, we started breaking out both the revenue and operating margin for these businesses. And we'll continue to do that so you can follow it over time. And essentially all of the major elements that are contributing to data-centric growth, you'll be able to follow in our financial statements, and we'll talk about it every quarter. Okay, let's go back to the deal thesis. So one of the things that we said is, clearly we're trying to find the market leader in ADAS. And when you think about how much evolution is already taking place in this space and how many people are competing in this space, or at least developing technology for this space, it may have seemed like perhaps a step too far for Intel. But we saw in Mobileye a clear leader, both in terms of their actual positioning, but also in terms of the roadmap that they have and could see based on the technical progress they'd already made, which seemed to us substantially beyond what any other player in the marketplace could do. I hope you got a little bit of a sense that today, just from being in the car, that it's a different ADAS experience here. And I think when Amnon takes you through his thoughts about the roadmap and where things are going, you'll see why this is truly a superbly differentiated asset, and one that, it's easy to say, look, it's hitting all of its financial metrics, but it's really about how is it positioned for the growth and the differentiation needed to succeed over the next 5, 10, 15 years, because the TAM, which we said would be $70 billion by 2030, you're going to see today numbers substantially larger than that as we look at more opportunities that are emerging in this space, and that I think Mobileye is uniquely positioned for. We've talked about big bets like this, because clearly an investment of 15 plus billion, that's a big bet. And so again, our criteria is, number one, it has to address the leading edge of a technology inflection. It has to allow us to play a larger role in our customer success. And of course, we have to see an attractive return over the long run. Mobileye came into the family already accretive and already generating significant operating margin, relatively early in its life. And you're going to see as Amnon goes through his areas just how significant a role Mobileye is playing in the lives of the OEMs as they address ADAS in their product fleets. You can already see the expansion of TAM. This is just through 2024, and you're going to hear a lot more about what the TAM could look like in 2030, and it's pretty exciting. And then, of course, just showing a revenue slide really understates the performance that we're seeing out of Mobileye with operating margins close to 30% in this part of its life. So, when you then say, okay, well, how's Mobileye doing you saw how it's doing relative to our M&A and big bet criteria. It certainly is meeting all three. So how's it doing with our strategy? And it's interesting. It was hard to decide not to put or highlight all of the elements of this when you look at our strategy. Number one, the best semiconductors. I think Amnon would argue that the IQ device is world class, and I think so. You could have highlighted that as well. But clearly, when you think about the autonomous revolution, and I would go back to AI, because there's a lot to learn from the work that's being done in Mobileye in terms of how you could impact AI in other work cases as well. Being the lead end-to-end platform provider for the new data world, clearly you don't always think of the car as a thing, but you were all riding in a thing, and that thing is interacting with the edge, it's interacting with the cloud. Increasingly, it'll be interacting with other things on four wheels, and this is going to be a platform opportunity that is unparalleled. Relentless focus on operational excellence and efficiency. If you've spent any time with Amnon, I'll just say that's a highlight in yellow right there too. And finally, continue to hire, develop, and retain the best, most diverse, and inclusive talent. The team here is fantastic. The retention of the team and the passion of this team to drive this roadmap and to expand their view of the roadmap is really inspiring. So, like I said, highlighting two is probably an understatement for this. One of the points I wanted to make is, AI. We get a lot of questions about AI because, we've talked about, we're going to have a GPU capability. We already have $3.5 billion of AI-based revenue reflected today. The largest component of that is in our Xeon, which is increasingly being configured in a way that gives very, very strong performance, particularly in inference. And then in the FPGA area, we're also seeing customers use our FPGAs for their inference, custom inference requirements. And then we have ASICs coming in, not only based on our Nirvana acquisition and Movidius, but of course, as a reminder, IQ is a fantastic AI device. And so, one of the things I would argue is we're at the very early stages. And each one of these activities and investments is teaching us things that could apply to other areas. And when we look at the investments that we'll need to make in AI going forward, we really believe we're at the very early stages. And so if you look at our venture fund and you look at the things that they're looking at, we're looking very broadly at AI across the ecosystem because the workloads and the what we're seeing for customers is so diverse, and the solutions to those aren't naturally fitted to the solutions that are in the market today. But as you go and you develop and you work on that unique use case, it's actually remarkably powerful for other opportunities that already exist in the space. So Intel is very committed to having a leadership role in this. We're going to invest quite broadly, and in many ways, Mobileye is our most advanced AI capability in the company. And then just to kind of put the data center to edge platform in a little more context. So on the Internet of Things, I've already talked about, we have a $5 billion business in 2019. That's where Mobileye plays today. In network silicon, the virtualization of the network has turned out to be a phenomenal opportunity to build networks on Xeon. We also believe that we're going to grow significantly in the base station area. This is an area where we essentially have no share today, and we think we're going to be at something on the order of 40% by 2022. So this whole continuum along the edge is very exciting for Intel, and one that we believe is going to be a very robust growth engine for the company over the next several years. So I want to get to the star of the show very quickly, but leave you with a message that clearly Mobileye, from our perspective, has moved well beyond the deal thesis. That's not a way of saying it's not meeting the deal thesis. Quite frankly, it's exceeding it in the ADAS arena in which we looked at it, not only from the positioning versus all competitors, but in terms of the financial delivery of the business. But it's the expectations for what this platform can mean more broadly, particularly as ADAS moves to true autonomy. I think you're going to see over the next hour and a half just how significant that could be. And so with that, you'll increasingly see more about Mobileye in the context of our strategy overall. But as long as we're at a phase where it's not as clear because of the relative size of the activities, we're going to hold events like this. So we're referring to this as an inaugural investor event for Mobileye, because we want to make sure that it's not lost on both our investors and on the media that follows the company just how important this asset is and is going to be, and what a role it's playing in defining autonomy around the world. So with that, and we're going to, again, that's part of the increasing transparency, but it's also how we're going to talk about it in our financial statements. We're going to try and make it as easy as possible for people to understand. And this is one of the great businesses. There's no touting needed to talk about Mobileye. It's truly one of the great emerging businesses. And to give you more color on that, Amnon, if you want to come up and talk to everybody. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming and look forward to the Q&A in a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, over here. Okay. Yeah, let's put this here. So after, okay, can you hear me well? Okay, so after we all had about, I think, 14 rides in congested traffic, I'll try now to put things in perspective. Now, what are we doing? What is our roadmap? What is the opportunity? How long? What time horizon we see for this opportunity? We see we're a marathon runner. We don't just look 5 years ahead. We look more than 10 years ahead. And why we believe that we are going to be a significant actor in this area. What distinguishes us from the rest of the crowd in approaching this kind of big opportunity. So I'll start first by Mobileye numbers, just a few slides. To date, we have shipped more than 50 million EyeQ chips. That means more than 50 million cars on the road have our ADAS technology. ADAS technology is technology that prevents collisions, prevents you from veering from a lane, hands-free driving, semi-autonomous, lane departure warning, lane keeping assist, traffic sign recognition, traffic light recognition. All of that is under driving assist, and we have more than 50 million cars on the road. And you can see also the growth of EyeQ, of our chip shipment. It's about 46% CAGR year over year, which is really phenomenal. If you look at the production programs, we have 45 running programs. Just to give an idea what a program means, a program, do you have here a time? There's no time. It's here. So what a program means, once we have a design win, it's a process of between 2 to 3 years of intense activity with the car maker, with the chosen tier one, until our technology is launched into serious production. So having 45 running programs is really huge in terms of the amount of activity. This year we had 22 design wins globally. So it's Europe, US, Korea, Japan, China. We have lots of China. You can see at the chart below just the breadth in terms of car makers and the number of programs for each car maker. And 2019, we had 16 product launches. So after those 2-3 years of serious development with the car maker, there's a product launch, a new car model or a facelift of an existing car model with our technology introduced as a built-in. Okay. Now, the way we look at the evolution of this technology, we operate on a wide spectrum. We operate on a spectrum covering from driving assist, robotaxi, and consumer autonomous vehicles. And we see those feeding one another, and actually they go into steps. The first step is driving assist. You have components like vehicle detection, pedestrian detection, traffic lights, traffic signs, lanes, drivable path. These components are then battle tested over billions of miles, because we're talking about millions of cars on the road running with this technology. Those functions that are battle tested are then integrated into our activity of autonomous driving. So this gives us a very powerful position. Next step comes a robotaxi. Now, why robotaxi? Why do we distinguish between robotaxi and passenger car autonomy? Because the function is the same. Level 4, level 5 autonomy. Why do we distinguish? Because we see there are 3 issues that really distinguish between those 2 buckets, robotaxi and passenger economy. One is the cost of the self-driving system. The cost today and in the foreseeable future, say the next 2-3 years, of a self-driving system is in the tens of thousands of dollars. So for example, the cost of a self-driving system that we are going to launch in Tel Aviv 2022 together with Volkswagen is going to be around $15,000. Our competitors, they have $20,000, $30,000. It's tens of thousands of dollars, which is good enough for robotaxi because you are replacing the driver. The driver is responsible for about 80% of the economical value of ride hailing. If you are replacing the driver with CapEx, then it's the cost of the car, the cost of the self-driving system, whether it's $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000, you have a return on investment, it makes sense. But for passenger car autonomy, that's too expensive because you take that cost, you need to apply a factor. It could be a factor of 3, a factor of 4, that is normally applied when the car maker takes a subsystem and integrates it into the car. So if you start with a $15,000 cost, you'll end up with a $60,000 option to a passenger car, which clearly is a showstopper. So from a cost perspective, technology is not ready for consumer autonomy. Next issue is regulation. Now, regulating, providing a license to drive to a robotic agent is a formidable challenge. It's a challenge that society has not yet faced, and you have established the framework, then you can go from robotaxi to a consumer. The third issue is scale, geographic scale. When you talk about robotaxi, it's really confined to a zip code. It's called geofenced. You map that zip code, you make sure that the mapping is fresh all the time, and the amount of effort that you need is reasonable. Say you're operating in a number of cities. But when you think about consumer AV, a consumer cannot be confined to a zip code. You buy a car, you would like to be able to drive it with the function that you purchased, like autonomous driving, everywhere. From point A to point B, where A and B is everywhere in the United States. Right? So the scalability issue, you need to build maps, high definition maps, which today are built mostly using a lot of manual labor. You need to build them at scale and make sure that they're refreshed at a very, very high frequency. This is something that doesn't exist today. So this is a reason why you can start with robotaxi and not consumer AV. So this is why we see this going in 2 steps. Robotaxi as a step along the way to the holy grail, which is consumer autonomous vehicles. And this is our mindset. This is how we think about the industry. Driving assist, robotaxi, and a consumer AV. When we look at about this evolution, the components that we have is one is driving assist, again, battle testing components. We have a camera-centric self-driving system, and this is something that you experienced in your drive. We built two subsystems, one just based on cameras, and the other one based on radars and LiDARs. And as I go on through the presentation, I'll explain the logic of why this helps in making a system robust and why it helps in validation. Next thing that is unique, a unique building block of Mobileye is the mapping, the crowdsourced mapping, REM. I'll provide more details of where we are, but we are now in production. Today we receive about 2 million kilometers of data per day from production vehicles all over the globe. And the fourth distinguishing element is our safety model, is our formal model that balances safety and utility in a transparent way that allows both the agility of driving that you experience today. You have been driving today at one of the most challenging territories. So it's less challenging than India, but it's way more challenging than what you can find in the US. So you're driving in a very, very challenging environment, and the ability of the car to be agile is also driven by our safety model, and I'll also update you where we are in terms of standardizing this model through activity with regulatory bodies. These are the silos of our activities, and we highlighted those activities that emerged after acquisition. So Mobileye has spread its, in the past 2 years since the closing of the acquisition, Mobileye has spread its wings considerably. So we had autonomous vehicle core software even before the acquisition. Of course, we had driving assist before the acquisition. We had the crowdsourced mapping for automotive before the acquisition. But post-acquisition, I'm going to detail, and Aries is going to even further detail our activity in mobility as a service. The full stack, going from a self-driving system to a full service. This is something that has emerged since the acquisition. Ability to build a self-driving system as a product, not just selling a chip with software. What we are doing in ADAS, but in the level 4, level 5 domain, we'll be selling a complete product, hardware, software product. We have a division that it works on sensors, build sensors, cutting edge LiDAR sensors. It's far into the future, 2023 and beyond that. Cutting edge LiDARs, cutting edge imaging radars, using unique technologies of Intel like silicon photonics, the ability to put active and passive laser elements on a chip. ICDG of Intel, which is a radar group. So there's lots of technological know-how that Mobileye did not have, that Intel has, that has been integrated into Mobileye. And of course, we have hundreds of people taking our chip and making it as an open compute. For example, the BMW 2021 launch has a number of IQ5 chips. One of them is completely programmed by BMW engineers. And we provide all the open environment, the libraries and API to allow them to program the chip. This kind of resource and manpower is also, again, post-acquisition. This slide gives you, captures the opportunity. And it captures the opportunity along a number of silos. So let's go from left to right. So this is a very important slide. I want to spend some time on it. So the first one is driving assist. And driving assist is an area that is rapidly evolving. It's not stagnating with a fixed set of functions. It's evolving. The functions are becoming more and more complicated, more sensors, there's higher appetite by car makers to add more driving assist into cars. There's an increased appetite by regulatory bodies like Euro NCAP and US NHTSA and NTSB to have a higher penetration of driving assist and more functions because it provingly saves lives. There's no doubt about its effect in saving lives. So in this column, we can see that the total addressable market in 2024 is around 5 billion, and by 2030 will grow to $7 to $8 billion dollars. So that's driving assist. We have also a data silo, capitalizing on our crowdsourced technology for generating data to build maps. This is an opportunity that by 2030 will have a TAM of about $3.5 billion. And of course, I'll provide more details as I go forward in this presentation. The robotaxi. Robotaxi, we're talking about the full stack. The full stack going from building a self-driving system, working, making, partnering, the other elements of the stack like route optimization, fleet management, demand analysis, teleoperation, all the stack that is needed to provide a service of mobility as a service. We put here that after a detailed study of this market, that in 2030 we predict it's a $160 billion TAM. There's also a TAM for selling a self-driving system. We are targeting the cost of a self-driving system in the year 2030, but we believe it will be much sooner than that in terms of the cost of around $4,000. And so this is a cost that is very, very relevant for a consumer AV. But why it's relevant for a consumer AV? Take this $4,000, apply a factor, say 3, say 4. Right? So you have somewhere between $12,000 to $16,000 as a cost to the customer. So you buy a premium car for, say, $80,000, add another $12,000 to $15,000 as an option that whenever you want, you press a button and sit in the back seat. It is reasonable for premium cars. And then with time, it will even go down to mid-segment cars and lower than that. So this is another TAM of about $10 billion just for selling self-driving system. The TAM for consumer AV, we believe that consumer AV will start 2025. So our plan is Robotaxi 2022, and I'll detail that later in the presentation, how we are approaching that. And 2025, we believe that we can achieve the cost targets of somewhere between $4,000 to $6,000 of a self-driving system, pass through the hurdles of regulation through the robotaxi experience, and reduce the cost, use our crowdsourced mapping to map the entire world, and I'll show you where we are in terms of mapping the world. I'll just give you a preview. All of Europe will be mapped by Q1 2020. All of the US will be mapped by the end of 2020. So by 2025, we'll have both the scalability, the geographic scalability of mapping, we'll have the cost down, and we will have also the regulation experience through the robotaxi. We believe that 2025 is the start of the consumer AV, and here we see a TAM of about $40 billion in 2030. And then there's the TAM of the sensors. As I said, we have a sensor division that is working on cutting-edge sensors, lidars, and radars. 2030, we see a $12 billion TAM. So if you put all of this together, right, if you exclude the mobility as a service, we have about $70 billion TAM of everything except the mobility as a service. The mobility as a service on its own, it's a $160 billion TAM. So you see that magnitude of the opportunity. Now, to seize this opportunity, you must be a marathon runner, because it's not something that you can achieve in a year or two. It's not even something that you can achieve in 5 years. You need to be able to have the will, the funding, and the right approach to sustain for a decade and even more in this area. And this is where also our strength in driving assist, as George mentioned, comes into play. We are not hemorrhaging money. We are generating money. And this is very, very critical, because all other actors in this space, they have no income, just investing money. We have income, and this income allows us to invest into the future. We don't take a dollar from Intel. Everything, it comes from our own profits. Okay, so this is the size of the opportunity. Now, the rest of the presentation is to give you indications on how we approach this opportunity. Okay, what is unique in our approach for this opportunity? What makes us believe that we can be a significant actor in seizing this opportunity? Okay. Again, a bit more about our driving assist. So this is the 2018 five-star vehicles. we have 75%. So 75% of all vehicles that received 5 stars around the globe is Mobileye. If you look at how many of those are powered by a single camera, so not camera plus radar, just camera, 100% Mobileye. There's no one there on the market that achieves 5 stars with just a camera. And 80% of those that use a Mobileye camera already achieve 5 stars. Right? So the technology is really elite technology. It's very, very high end, because with it you can get your 5 stars even without a radar, just a camera. Okay, so this is kind of the solution portfolio. So we have the basic driving assist, which we call level 1, level 2 driving assist. This is the driving assist that you're all familiar with. System that does collision avoidance, that gives you, does lane keeping assist, maybe a center in the lane, will give you information about traffic signs. This is kind of the basic ADAS. This is the ADAS that gives you the 5 stars. Okay? So this is the level 1, level 2 driving assist. And our business model there is we sell our chip together with all the software that has been validated and the application software that comes with it. Then there's another silo, which is a new silo. This silo has emerged in the past year and a half. We call it level 2 or even level 2 plus plus. So level 2 means that the driver is responsible. Level 3 and above, there's kind of an interplay who's responsible. For example, level 3, the system is responsible with a grace period of 10 seconds, say, for example, which is very, very problematic because you start needing redundancies, because if the system is responsible for 10 seconds, then how do you make sure that in those 10 seconds you're not going to get into an accident, so you have to have redundancies. But level 2, the driver is responsible, so you don't need that amount of redundancies. So level 2 plus means that you are adding more technology like high definition maps, more sensors. For example, the vehicle that you have driven today, the bill of material is around $1,000. Because what does it have? It has 12 cameras, 4 of them are parking cameras. Parking cameras today is about $200, that's it. So it has 12 cameras and a computing chip. An IQ5 powers all what you have witnessed today. Now, it doesn't have, because it's only cameras, it's not safe enough for autonomous driving. This is why we have another layer of lidars and radars. But think of it as a level 2, where the driver is responsible. Now, you can provide an incredible amount of value with the kind of experience that you have seen today in a level 2 position. So this is what we call a level 2 plus. We can offer much higher values of today's level 2 driving assist, still when the driver is responsible. And there's a lot of traction in this area with car makers. I'll show you in the next few slides. And we are the dominant supplier of level 2 plus by huge margins. I'll show you. Then comes the level 4, level 5, the full autonomy. Right? Just to remind you, the difference between level 4 and level 5 is that in level 4, there are certain modes that you do not support. For example, you can say that when the rain is hard, I don't support that. When it's snowing, I don't support it. You can say that I never take an unprotected left turn. So you decide what modes you do not support, and within the modes that you support, it's completely autonomous. That means that there's no driver behind the steering wheel, there could be no one behind the steering wheel. So that's level 4. Level 5, there are no constraints. Snow, weather, whatever. Okay. So basically, when we talk about autonomous driving, it's we and everyone else in this landscape, we all talk about level 4. Okay. So we talk about level 4, level 5 as mobility as a service, the robotaxi, and then level 4, level 5 as passenger car autonomy. Okay. And these are the two silos. And then in the bottom is our mapping activity, the crowdsourced mapping activity, which creates a data opportunity, has its own income. So those are the solution portfolio. Our chip today in production is IQ4, running on many car models, has been launched early 2018 as an IQ4. IQ5 has been sampled half a year ago. It's already running in our test vehicles. It will go into serious production with car makers in 2021, and we have many car makers with design wins with IQ5 for 2021. IQ6 will come out end of 2020, will be sampled end of 2020, and you see below kind of the industry numbers of tera operations per second. So we're talking about really cutting edge silicon, but really Mobileye's play is not a silicon play. We are a solution play. So it's comparing us to companies that provide silicon is not the right comparison. We are a vertically integrated company providing a complete solution where software is really a very, very strong enabling driving force of what we do and what we offer. Okay, so let's go a bit more details into the driving assist section. You can see that our revenue forecast is increasing at least 20%, 30% year over year. When you look at the chart below, the ADAS, the driving assist sales exceeds OEM plans year after year. So it's a very lively field. Our penetration rate is constantly increasing from 32%. So it's not our penetration rate, it's driving assist penetration rate. From 32%, it will increase to 60% by 2024. Emerging markets like India, we have already traction in India, and we believe that India has very, very high potential of growth of driving assist. The level 2 plus, those high-end products which involves multiple sensors, a map, and the highest functions possible is also a rapidly growing segment. The ASPs naturally these ASPs are very, very high, about 10 times the ASP of driving assist. And we have also a play which we call Vision Zero, is to take the kind of experience that you have seen today and build it around a preventive system for driving assist. So to prevent the driver from entering into a dangerous situation, just like today, stability control prevents a driver from skidding. And we believe that will also increase the TAM and also save much more lives than driving assist saves today. So this is the level 2 silo. We're talking about lane centering. We're talking about high definition maps using our crowdsourced technology. We're talking about hands-free driving. So 8 out of the 11 level 2 plus systems out there in the market are powered by Mobileye's technology. There are 12 active programs. We have a 100% design win in those active programs. So we are very strongly situated in the future of driving assist. So we're not only strongly situated in the present and past of driving assist, we are strongly situated in the future of driving assist. Okay, let's look at what are those differentiating assets going forward, and I break them down into 3. One is we look at the world from a camera-centric view. The predominant school of thought in autonomy is a LiDAR-centric point of view. I think there are only 2 companies that are camera-centric. It's us and Tesla. And no wonder that we and Tesla at one point in time were good partners, right? So now camera-centric is a very big challenge because cameras are sensors that do not have a direct depth perception. We get our depth from implicit cues, like perspective cues, shading cues, motion cues. We don't have a direct depth perception. And it's not a stereo that gives us the depth perception. You shut one eye, you still see depth, right? So being able to create an end-to-end autonomous driving experience, like the one that you have witnessed today, requires a very precise 3D understanding of the world, yet the sensors do not give you 3D perception. So it's a very, very difficult challenge to meet. But if you meet this challenge, I will show you that you can create a much more robust system with a much simpler validation process when you then combine radars and LiDARs as a second layer. And we call this true redundancy, and this is really unique to Mobileye. And as you saw in the garage, there were 2 types of vehicles. There was the vehicles that you have driven, which is only powered by cameras, and there was another vehicle with lidars on it. Right? We have a separate team working on those other vehicles, also doing an end-to-end autonomous driving without cameras at all. And then we combine those two to create redundant systems, and this is what we call true redundancy. The second distinguishing, and there are many byproducts of this approach. For example, one byproduct of the approach, it's not only that it's the right way to build an autonomous car from a robustification point of view and validation point of view and cost point of view, and I'll make that point later, but also as a company that has a wide spectrum from driving assist to autonomous, being able to do camera-centric, fully autonomous drive using camera-centric allows us to trickle down advanced technologies to driving assist. So allows us to control or influence the evolution of driving assist in very, very interesting ways, because we are solving a very, very difficult problems that others are not even attempting to solve, because they are lidar-centric. Okay, so there's lots of advantages to this approach. Second is our crowdsourced technology for building high-definition maps. It is something that we began in 2015 with announcement of major contracts with BMW, with Volkswagen, with Nissan. Today we have contracts with 6 car makers for harvesting data, for sending this data to the cloud. And for the past 4 years, we have been working on algorithms that take this data and automatically create high-definition maps. This is something very, very unique to Mobileye. There isn't any company besides Mobileye with this ability, with this technology on the road. And this is important for scalability. You want to power autonomous driving, you need to have those high-definition maps, and you have to have them at scale and with a very, very fast refresh rate. You'd like to power level 2+. Level 2+ really comes with high-definition maps. It allows you to elevate all functions of ADAS if you have a high-definition map. And here we have it at very, very efficient and low cost because it's crowdsourced. So this is a unique and differentiating element of Mobileye. And we have been working on it for years. It's not just now a clever idea. It's a lot of technology and science behind it. The third element is our safety model. We call this a RSS. You know, I always say in public forums, the biggest challenge in putting an autonomous car on the road is not the perception, it's not the driving policy, it's the regulatory dimension of it. And just to give you a flavor why this is the most difficult problem is that you are driving in the road amongst human-driven cars. Now, you need to negotiate. Now, each negotiation creates risks of an accident. Say I want to change lane in congested traffic. If I wait for a gap to emerge and then I simply enter into that gap, that's fine. But I don't know in which world people will give you a gap, right? It doesn't happen. Right? So if you wait for a gap, you'll simply block traffic. So you need to push yourself. Pushing yourself means that somebody needs to slow down. Now, let's assume that someone didn't slow down and hit you. Now, who's to blame? So think about this from a regulatory point of view. How do you handle this? Because there is a balance between safety and utility. This is how traffic merging into traffic works. Right? So you need to think about this not just from a regulatory point of view, it's also a scientific point of view. What is the model that will allow you to merge into traffic, yet make guarantees about not causing an accident? Because if you don't make a guarantee, society will not accept these machines on the road. Because one has to be clear, society doesn't have a choice with human drivers. Because we need humans to drive, because this is how the economy works. The mobility allows the economy to flow. So we take a 16-year-old kid and give that kid a driving license, knowing that that kid is not experienced, knowing that that kid could put other people at harm, because we have no choice. But with machines, we have choice. Who said we need to give machines a license to drive? So the bar is much, much higher. We have to come with guarantees. If we don't come with guarantees, the first few accidents will kill the industry. Okay? So we have technology that we have published 2 years ago that it formalizes all the common sense behind decision-making of merging into traffic. We published it, made it transparent. We have a very, very effective and deep activity with regulatory bodies all around the globe, in Israel, in Europe, in China, in US, in industry bodies like IEEE, SSAE, all working towards standardizing and internalizing these concepts such that when the time comes to put an autonomous car on the road, people will be accustomed to this model. And this is something unique to Mobileye. All other actors, for them, safety is something proprietary. They don't talk about it. It's under the hood, it's secret sauce, whatever. Mobileye, Intel is the only company that is transparent. Put it as an academic paper, everything is open. We even have source code that regulatory bodies or everyone is free to use. Okay, so this is also a distinguishing element of Mobileye. Okay, so the camera-centric approach, again, we look at the space of autonomous driving from two perspectives. One is the perception, right? You have sensors, they perceive the world. You have compute that understands the world, and you can make a mistake. There's a vehicle in front of you, and you missed that vehicle, and because of that, you created an accident. So here we tell ourselves, well, we should prove that we do not exceed the human probability of failure. Right? The second part is action. The system makes decisions. I want to change a lane. I'm taking way of this vehicle or that vehicle. I'm making decisions. And here what we say, there should not be any lapse of judgment. It's not like humans that have lapse of judgment. Here you should come up with a model that is provingly correct, that under certain assumptions that can be agreed and engaged with regulatory bodies, you can then prove that this system will never have a lapse of judgment, will never cause an accident. Okay, and this is where the RSS comes into play. So when you think about the perception part, the probabilities that you need to reach, and again, you have to be as good as humans and better. The probabilities that you need to reach are really mind-blowing. So I'll give you an example. We know the statistics of human driving, that the probability of a fatality per 1 hour of driving is 1 to a million. So it means that the mean time between failures is 1 million hours of driving. But this includes also driving under influence. This includes also being distracted by looking at your smartphone. So let's multiply this by 10, just to be on the safe side, just to reach human capability. So we're talking about the mean time between failures of 1 to 10 million hours of driving. Besides the fact that validating something like this is humongous, you need to collect at least 10 million hours of driving just to start thinking of how to validate such a claim. I don't believe that there is technology that can meet those probabilities. Why do I claim that? Because I know what are the probabilities in driving assist. Because driving assist has a function called AEB, where the car brakes before a collision. And we are the leading company in providing this function. And this function contains the cutting-edge technologies that you can think of. All the buzzwords in machine learning, deep technology, deep networks, all the buzzwords that you think you know are all embedded into driving assist. Okay, so there are no dummies there that write code. It's the latest technology. And we know what is the probability of failure there. It's once every tens of thousands of hours of driving, which is very impressive, but it's 3 orders of magnitude away from the 10 to the power of 7. So, but now if you think about this as separate subsystems, say you have now 2 subsystems, and with the misdetection, you take an OR of those subsystems. So whenever one of those subsystems sees a target, you say there is a target. So now clearly the mean time between failure is a multiplication of the 2. So now instead of showing a mean time between failure of 10 to the power of 7, which is 10 million, you need to show a mean time, you should show a square root of that, which is 10 to the power of 3.5. 10 to the power of 3.5 is 3,000. Showing that you have a subsystem with a mean time between failure of 3,000 hours is achievable with today's technology. This is why this true redundancy that we're building is so important. It allows us to seriously validate the system and claim and prove that we reach probabilities of human driving because of this true redundancy. Because if you fuse all the sensors into one system before you start doing anything, you take cameras, radars, LiDARs, and then plug them into one big network and make decisions, then you need to show the 10 to the power of 7. You don't have redundancy. Okay, so this is a very, very strong point of Mobileye. And the challenge is that it's a much more difficult problem than anyone else attempting to do, right? Controlling the car using LiDAR processing is relatively easy. You can assemble a team, build a car within 6 months, and show something that works. Okay? Being able to do this only with cameras is a feat that is very, very difficult. Nobody, as far as I know, can show you what you have seen today just with cameras. But it is important, as you saw, it will allow us to make a system that is robust and we can validate it. Okay, you have seen this clip of the cameras. Let's go into mapping. So the idea of the mapping, the crowdsourced mapping, is we have vehicles with driving assist. So there are millions of them. So we shipped about 17 million chips just in 2019. So there are millions of cars with driving assist. We put in additional software to those systems, which we called harvesting. It's extracting certain information from the scene, like landmarks and lanes and so forth, packaging them into about 10 kilobytes per kilometer, so it's very, very lean in terms of bandwidth, sending it to the cloud, and in the cloud, we have algorithms that we have been working on them for years that piece this information and build high-definition maps. And then those maps can be sent back to vehicles to power autonomous driving, to power level 2+, and so forth. Okay, so this is just a clip showing what this means. All those yellow rectangles are landmarks that the system identifies. The lanes are projection of the map data back to the image to show the accuracy. On the right-hand side, you see this all projected onto Google Earth just to get a sense of accuracy. So we see that this technology being applicable into 3 silos. The first one is powering autonomous vehicles. This was the original motivation for developing this technology. The second one, the middle, is level 2+. Level 2+ is an emerging, high volume production, high ASP, high value, where if you have maps that are being manufactured efficiently, because it's high volume manufacturing, the cost should be very, very low. So you need to manufacture those maps efficiently and refresh them efficiently, then you can power level 2+ and win a lot of value. So this is the second silo. The third silo is non-automotive. And there's lots of non-automotive applications with significant TAM that I'll show you. So when we look at harvesting vehicles, we have contracts with 6 car makers. BMW had launched production vehicles more than 6 months ago, actually even a year ago. So we have tens of thousands, I think now it's hundreds of thousands of BMW vehicles sending data to the cloud. Very soon, VW vehicles, Nissan vehicles also sending data. Today we have about 2 million kilometers of data per day being sent. By 2020, we'll have about 1 million cars harvesting data. 2021, 1 million in the US. We have also programs that are using this data to enable level 2+. There are about 6 car makers, contracts with 6 car makers using the maps to power level 2 plus. By 2022, you see in this graph, there will be 14 million cars sending data. So you can see the power, the scalability power of this technology. Okay, I'll skip this. So here's just a picture capturing the data that we have today. So this was a few months ago from 40,000 vehicles, but you see all of Europe is captured. Japan is captured, South Korea is captured, areas of the US, so those are areas where people drive with BMWs, so you can continue. And at 2 million kilometers, 2 million kilometers of data per day. So here's a kind of a zoom in. You see Europe, you see United States. Our milestone is that by the end of first quarter 2020, we map all of Europe. Map meaning high definition maps. By end of 2020, because by 2020 we have more cars centered in the US that are going to launch. and will be end of 2020 will map most of the US. So I'm not talking about just highways, all of the US, everything, all of the US. And we have a very strong activity in China, both in driving assist. 25% of the future volume from 2019 design wins are coming from China. I'm not talking about China joint ventures. I'm talking about China domestic. Okay, China joint venture we always had. You know, GM has joint venture, Volkswagen has joint venture in China. I'm talking about domestic, 25%. So it just shows the power of the growth coming from China. But also, we are working, again, complying with the Chinese laws of data, working in establishing abilities to harvest data from China. We have a contract with NIO. They have 30,000 vehicles, electric vehicles in China that are going to harvest data. Soon we have built a joint venture with Tsinghua University a few weeks ago that includes a mapping company as part of the joint venture to allow us the licenses to harvest data for map making in China. We have deals with two major Chinese OEMs for harvesting data and also for autonomous driving in China. So China is becoming a very, very important territory for our roadmap going forward. So this is the NIO that I mentioned and additional Chinese OEMs. This is the joint venture with the Tsinghua University. So now let's look at the non-automotive part, which I think is also very interesting. So here is a chart showing all areas where data play a role. You know, dynamic data, static data, fleet management system. So now let's focus on what we call static data. And there is a niche which we call asset mapping. So to get an idea of asset mapping, let's look what happens in the UK, because it's a partnership that we built a year ago with Ordnance Survey, the UK mapping company. So it's called utility strike. You drill a hole in the road and you hit a gas pipe or a gas line or a water pipe. That's called a utility strike. So there are 60,000 utility strikes per year in the UK. You see the indirect cost is billions of dollars, direct cost is hundreds of millions of dollars. People die, people get wounded. Not every company is allowed to drill a hole in there are about 150 companies. So you think, okay, can't they map it? Well, they try to map it. 2016, 48% of utilities were mapped, but then comes the second line that 84% of those were wrongly mapped. It's kind of tricky to map it. So now, let's see how our technology can help. We have a front-facing camera. We have this technology also as an aftermarket. So we put those aftermarket units in utility companies, utility cars, utility trucks. While this camera is moving, it can capture data, not only data for building maps, but data about where are the telco boxes, where are the drainage, everything that is relevant to aligning above the road information and below the road information. So, for example, you know, traffic lights, road signs, road markings, manholes, a construction area, drainage, telco boxes. There's a large vocabulary of things that the camera knows to identify, and that is being sent to the cloud, and then Ordnance Survey, the UK mapping company, takes this data, aligns it into their maps of the utilities, of all the stuff below the road, and now you get an alignment. And this turned out to be very, very successful. We see potential revenue just from the UK alone comes from $70 million a year. We see a TAM of about $750 million just from this niche. So this is an example of a non-automotive application of a camera as a smart agent. Our RSS activity, I'll skip this. I already gave kind of a preview of what is the challenge of balancing between safety and utility. And RSS is a formal model of how to do this balancing. It states that you set a number of assumptions. Those assumptions have parameters. So an example of an assumption, when I'm driving in a 3-lane highway and there's a car on the next lane, I'm making an assumption that this car is not going to spontaneously hit me. Because without this assumption, I can never drive side by side to other vehicles. Right? So this is an assumption that people make. Or let's assume that I'm driving behind another car. I'm making an assumption that if the car in front of me brakes at an emergency braking, then it's limited to 1G braking, 1G force braking, 1.5G force braking. Because if it's infinite, then I need to keep a very, very long distance, very, very long gap between me and the other car. So we make assumptions. So the RSS model says, let's clarify what those assumptions are. Let's put them on the table. These are the assumptions, and those are the parameters of the assumptions. For example, in our RSS that you experience right now, when we change lane, we assume that the next lane car, if it needs to slow down, it slows down up to 0.1G. That's a parameter that we put, because we feel that in Israel, it's the right number. In California, it will be 0.05G, okay? It's a number. We can then engage with the regulatory bodies, tell them, this is what we feel is the number based on the data and so forth. You want us to put a different number? Tell us what is the different number you want to put, right? So there are assumptions. Then we take the worst case. It means that we don't predict what other people will do. We take the worst case. For example, if I'm driving behind another car, worst case is that this car will spontaneously stop. And I cannot predict when it's going to do that. I'm not even attempting to predict. This is why I need to keep enough distance such that if this happens under the assumptions that I made, I'll never hit that car, right? So RSS puts these two together with a mathematical model that can then give guarantees that if you agree with the assumptions, and under this model of taking the worst case, you'll never cause an accident. This is basically RSS. So it's regulation and science put together, right? It's not enough just to take a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of philosophers and say, okay, what are the rules of the game? There is also mathematics involved here. And this is what we did 2 years ago in this paper called Responsibility Sensitive Safety, RSS. In Israel, we are working towards enacting a law. Of course, the law is not going to be RSS. It's not going to have equations of RSS, but a law about the principles of balancing safety and utility, about the principles of how you balance safety and utility. Industry acceptance. There's a very, very strong industry acceptance of RSS by industry actors like China, ITS, Baidu, Valeo, all formal announcements of embracing RSS. Safety first. You see that the number of partners in this safety first, it's called the CFAD, a document which was led by BMW, has a chapter about all the principles of RSS. You can see here some media picking on those the CFAD document and where RSS plays a role. So there is a strong industry endorsement of it, and it's an ongoing process. We have, through Intel, a policy and government group that is diligently working on evangelizing RSS in front of industry actors, industry forums, and regulatory bodies. Okay, so I'll skip those clips because you have driven the car, so you have your own impression of what we do. Our next 8 minutes. So next next silo is the self-driving system as a product. Because our activity in driving assist is our product is a chip. Chip bundled with all the application software, all the technology. When we're going to level 4, level 5, we're designing a complete hardware software solution, which at the beginning we purchase sensors. Later, once our sensor division matures, we can also use the sensors being developed by Intel. So self-driving system as a product, again, we are targeting, it's not only the robotaxi, really the holy grail, our sights, our North Star is the consumer AV. Right? How do we go and build a system that will cost $4,000? Okay, it's what are the right chips? This is why IQ6 is important. The camera centric is important because then when you add lidars and radars, you add them only for redundancy. So you don't need to be brute force with other sensors. It also reduces cost. And here we have to build a complete, very, very sophisticated hardware. This is again a very strong cooperation with Intel. Most of the manpower for validating the automotive quality of this kind of project comes from Intel employees. These are the kind of milestones. EPM 44 is what you have driven right now. It has 4 IQ4s inside. So what you have driven today is powered by 4 IQ4s. We have now in testing EPM 52, which is 2 IQ5s. If it wasn't for the IR day, it was been working right now. We simply didn't want to take the risk of changing hardware just before the investor day. But it's already ready, and within days we'll replace the IQ4. And the product, the hardware that will power our robotaxi starting 2022 is called EPM 59, which has 9 IQ5 chips, 3 as a fail operational and 6 as the main compute. And we established a deal, and this is one of the new announcements that we're making with NIO, which has a number of interesting components to it. So NIO is an electric car maker. They have about 30,000 electric cars in China. They'll be integrating our self-driving system into their 2022 car models as a consumer AV. So not robotaxi, consumer, because I told you consumer AV will start 2025, but here we have an opportunity to start practicing consumer AV starting 2022 in China. NIO cars will have our SDS integrated. We can then purchase those cars for our robotaxi fleet. And this saves us the retrofit, because in any other configuration, we need to buy cars and then retrofit those cars with our self-driving system. So we'll need to build an assembly plant and a retrofit. It costs money, labor, and so forth. Here, we'll already buy cars with our self-driving system already fully integrated. Saves money and also much more robust in terms of the integration, hardware, software integration. Okay? Third, it's a manufacturing house of our self-driving system. We can buy the self-driving system from NIO and sell it to whichever OEM or whichever robotaxi fleet that we want to sell a self-driving system to. If we look at mobility as a service, the larger scope, and here I'll leave this to Erez to give you a more detailed presentation about our mobility as a service, but here we're talking all the way. I'm not just talking about building the self-driving system. We're talking about all the layers above the self-driving system, the fleet operation, the route optimization, whether it's ride-hailing or ride-sharing, demand analysis, mixed fleets, teleoperation, all the layers that you need in order to eventually provide a service. Okay? And Erez would explain first why it is attractive from an economical point of view, and what are we doing in order to build the entire stack, where our sandboxes, Israel is the first sandbox. Again, 2022 commercial deployment together with Volkswagen in Tel Aviv, and later it will ramp up to all of Israel. We have also, this is again a new announcement, a similar deal with RATP. RATP is the public transport operator in France. It's the biggest public transport operator in France, where we are joining forces, first as a pilot in cities in the roads of Paris to enable full level 4 with a safety driver at first in 2020, and then ramping up towards something very, very similar to what we're doing here in Israel, fully level 4 commercial deployment of autonomous driving. So Israel 2022, France 2022, China, as I mentioned, with NIO 2022, and we believe that the US will be ready 2023. We don't want to be in a rush mode in launching in the US. US is a huge opportunity, but also it's a scary risk. And I'll explain why it's a scary risk. US, the DNA of the American system is under regulation, which for most industries it's very, very good, right? You don't want regulation. Right? Um, but in our domain, lack of regulation includes a lot of risk. Because imagine what happens when you have an accident. Now you are at the mercy of a jury system, and in the mercy of trial lawyers. You need to engage with regulatory bodies. We feel that through Israel, through Europe, France, through China, we'll gain enough regulatory experience that will arrive to the US much more ready after we have been engaging with industry actors like SAE, IEEE, after our concepts of safety have taken time to be internalized in the US, even though there's not going to be a law, because the US system it's against regulation and it will never change, at least not in the foreseeable future. But at least our concepts will have time to be internalized such that when we reach the US, we'll be in a much better position. We don't share the enthusiasm of being first to take a territory. We think that the number of actors who will be able to pull it off in building a commercial proposition of a self-driving system is going to be very, very small. We believe that most of the actors will not succeed. We believe it's going to be a small number of actors, and because of the size of the industry is so big, you really don't need to be first. So 2, 3, 4 actors, this is what we believe is going to survive this space. What's more important is to do the right thing. Not to rush, but to do the right thing, and this is our game plan. So Erez will provide more information about what we're doing in Tel Aviv, and RATP I just mentioned. This is kind of the game plan until 2023, as I said, Israel, France, China first, and then USA. And this is kind of a summary, the last 40 seconds that I have. A summary of all the news. We look at the left column, well, 50 million chips have been shipped so far. We have 8 out of the 11 level 2 systems on the road. High volume program launched like the Golf, the Passat, RAM harvesting that began with BMW and now ramping up with Volkswagen and Nissan, and there are 3 more car makers that we have contracts with, 22 design wins. On the mapping area, Europe would be fully mapped in 2020, US end of 2020. The non-automotive aspect with the with the partnership with Ordnance Survey in the UK is gaining momentum with revenues beginning 2020, and with the mobility as a service, the JV with Volkswagen and Champion Motors is on track for 2022. The TAM for robotaxi is $160 billion, so it's a huge opportunity. The collaboration with the NIO to give us a first try of consumer AV in China very early 2022, have access to cars where our self-driving system is already built in and integrated, use that for a robotaxi fleet, and the cooperation with RATP, which is very similar to the cooperation here in Tel Aviv, gives us another territory to start working on for self-driving robotaxi. So this is the end of my hour. I think let's leave, there's going to be a session of Q&A. So let's leave all the questions for that session of Q&A and leave room now for Erez to focus on mobility as a service. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Amnon. All right, at this point in time, we're going to have a 10-minute break. For those of you on the web, you should see a splash counter that will help you understand when we're going to rejoin. For those in the room, it's a really good opportunity to stand up and stretch your legs. There's some additional water in the back of the room, and there's coffee and restrooms out the door and down the hall. Please be back in your seats in 10 minutes, at which point we'll cover mobility as a service strategy and some Q&A. And with that, see you in 10. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome back. At this point in time, I want to introduce Mobileye Executive Vice President of Products and Strategy, Erez Dagan, who will talk to our Mobility as a Service strategy. Erez?
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot for the very long day with us here. I hope it was valuable to give you a deeper look into what is going on here. A second, sorry. A deeper look into what is going on here, and how do we propel the revolutions that we're driving both in the consumer market and forward into the mobility and data markets. Amnon have set the ground for my discussion perfectly, so we have a lot of terminology that Amnon already used, so we can build from to go into slightly deeper understanding of why it is that we're going at it, why it's even critical or essential for us to go at it, and how we go about it to beat the market learning curve in this industry. So we start by this. Now I'm speaking too high. We start by describing the mobility market, the inefficiencies and the opportunity in it, and we'll derive the available market out of that. The mobility supply challenge is serve individual A to B at time T demand instances while minimizing latencies, costs, and collateral or societal burdens. This is a video of mobility, 24 hours of mobility in Tel Aviv, which is a city that we're playing in. What one can appreciate is the very uneven distribution of demand in time and space, which makes this a very challenging problem. That's why it's not easily tackled by any of the currently known means of transportation. Of course, existing solutions include vehicle ownership, driver on demand taxi, driver on demand hailing, and I'm intentionally using the term driver on demand. We are renting another person to drive us from one point to another. This is one of the key inefficiency in these solutions. Public transport, with the economical inefficiencies in each of them, vehicle ownership has 94% idle time, captures parking space. The taxis suffer from dispatch inefficiencies and driver per passenger. Driver on demand hailing suffers from fleet level inefficiencies. This is a less known fact. From analysis of how many drivers or how many vehicles are needed to serve San Francisco, the result is about 2,000 vehicles. Today we have 60,000 registered ride-hailing drivers in the city, clogging the streets. The competition between the drivers and the need to make the drivers close on a adequate income source makes this, in coordination, a key economical inefficiency of this field. This translates in the end to driver attrition, driver acquisition costs, and several other factors that we will see. The societal burdens are, of course, reduced traffic flow and street space. The mobility, affordability, and accessibility is limited. Inefficient energy use overall, and noise and air pollution. Let's see how these translate into, how these are exemplified by some relative units of cost per mile. When we look at the taxi, we see that the driver commission has a part, the car itself, financing the car and maintaining it has a part, and some other for the dispatch of the taxi station. Moving to ride-hailing, shared economy should have been the resolution of all problems in this space. It does improve the fleet level dispatch because it's automated. It does take away the vehicle costs because these are driver-owned vehicles or leased. But the driver commission, and this is the word commoditized here is painful. This is commoditizing the component of the human driver that sits there. That's the hardest area to commoditize. Although commoditized, it's still capturing 75% of that cost. Expensive driver acquisition, high attrition, as I mentioned. Of course, the robotaxi will offer no driver, taking the cost of that. Centralized coordinated fleet, referring to the problem I described earlier of the incoordination between hailing drivers. Not always the greedy choice, the closest vehicle is the right choice in terms of fleet level utilization, fleet level optimum. This vehicle may need to go to recharge while another further vehicle comes and get this ride, and that will get us from 60,000 drivers to 2,000 vehicles. Of course, the high capital and maintenance, the capital and maintenance costs are higher when it comes to the robotaxis, but still allowing us to dramatically drop the cost per mile. The robotaxi pooling in cases where the demand density allows for it, and there are such cases, and these will prevail as the cost per mile goes down. There's a snowball here. We drop the costs because of robotaxi advantages. We get higher density of demand, and we can identify pooling opportunities, which will drop the cost even further. Interesting to ask ourselves now, how do these relate to vehicle ownership alternatives? That's where the TAM is not growing out of thin air. We're taking it, converting it from alternative transportation, means of transportation. And the taxi and ride-hailing space constitutes only 1% of the mobility in the US, just to get a sense of scale. When we look at vehicle ownership, the cost per mile is governed by the density you live in and how much you use your vehicle. Okay, so if you live in a metropolitan and you hardly use your vehicle, your costs are very high per mile. What's interesting to see is that when we look at the robotaxi, and robotaxi pooling costs, these go very deep into the vehicle ownership alternative. In high density areas, we can target medium users, and in urban areas, slightly less dense, we can capture light users. In suburbans, that's the other legs of our strategy. Consumer AV will probably dominate those areas. We're not letting it go. What's also interesting to note when we look at public transport is that the pooled robotaxi is very effectively competing with bus cost per passenger. This is a dramatic result, okay? And we must not forget that the value of pooled robotaxi is dramatically higher than that of sitting in a bus, fixed route, fixed time, hard to access, et cetera, et cetera. All of these inefficiencies and opportunities for us translate to a $160 billion TAM expectations by 2030. There's a model underneath this expectation which takes into account all the factors that I just counted. What is the future value beyond just the financial opportunity? What is the future value of consumer-facing mobility services? So mobility is, by all means, the next economical revolution to unfold. Transportation is a commonly unaccounted for transaction cost. That's something to look at transportation as something that currently you all feel that you want to pay for your drive to work, or you want to pay for your drive to that shop. No, the shop wants to pay for your drive there. And this mobility and physical traffic are both shaping. Physical traffic is very similar to virtual traffic in websites. Think about being able to attract traffic or even distribute traffic away from a train station as an economical engine. So it's the second derivative of just selling mobility miles. And we are eyeballing that opportunity because that's under a study that was done by Intel 2017, comprises a big chunk of what's called the passenger economy. It unfolds, it allows us to access all of the other inefficiencies that are in the fact that mobility is a transaction cost that's not accounted for. So what we see here, the reason I captured the snapshot so I don't need to stop the video in the middle, is that we can certainly see traffic patterns of places that want to distribute. Here is a train station in Tel Aviv. These are places on a beach, like business places that want to attract and distribute people away. We can easily see an evolution of our business model into business-to-business traffic market. So if today we have vehicle ownership and public transport, these are going to evolve into, or are partially evolving into driver on demand, vehicle on demand, renting a vehicle. With public transport, driver on demand, and vehicle on demand evolving in the next step into mobility as a service, the more wealthy ones will go to consumer AV, or the ones that live outside of dense areas that have a higher opportunity cost. But these will all converge, and that's an interesting link between the two legs that we have, consumer AV and mobility as a service, to mobility marketplace and traffic marketplaces. These are very, very fascinating opportunities ahead of us. And these call for us to stay at holding on the mobility demand exposure and supply management skills. This is what will allow us to tap into these values, future values. These kind of transaction types could be peer-to-peer AV. I can share my vehicle when it's idle. Inward, outward traffic bundles. As I said, businesses can fund traffic coming in. Train station can fund your traffic, last mile traffic home. City planning tool. A city can easily now navigate the growth areas and the focus by this tool, by this instrument. The translation of that into 2050 is up as high as 7 trillion. Okay? This second layer of the light blue layer here of traffic or business to business. So another strategic reasoning for our play in mobility as a service is, of course, the consumer autonomy that Professor Shashua mentioned earlier. The consumer autonomy is the next market-wide automotive product. Self-driving systems will constitute a sizable portion of the vehicle value at that point in time. This is entering that industry of vehicle ownership that shifts from combustion engines to hardware and software. And we're going to be taking a sizable portion out of that. Mobility as a service, as you can see in this graph, is by definition, robotaxi here, by definition, the first productization arena for self-driving capabilities. That's where the product will be optimized, costs and values, and will be. There's a lot of importance for us as a players that already captured the first 2 waves of driver assistance, level 1 and 2, level 2 plus wave that we see rising right now, to capture the next one of consumer AV by forging our self-driving product towards its mass market phase of consumer AV. Amnon already mentioned these factors. We have safety and regulation, geo-expansion, cost and value optimization to unfold during that time. Mass will govern self-driving productization pace. We want to control it. We want to be there ahead of the market learning curve. Consumer AV market will be timed by SDS productization and consequent cost value optimization steps within mobility as a service. Hence, developing and driving the mobility as a service to quick convergence is critical to secure our SDS product fit and to dominate the consumer AV ramp up ahead of the industry learning curve. Okay? Nascent industries such as the mobility as a service, if decoupled, if tries to optimize and address the problem in a way that's decoupled, the value nodes have sometimes more hesitant crosstalk between them, which makes that learning curve a bit longer. Having this vertical core, self-driving system at the bottom, service layer at the top, service affluence, traffic and mobility affluence, data processing at the top, with engagements, with partnerships throughout, we can help direct this mobility as a service proposition to quick convergence ahead of market learning curve. This is not unlike 2007 and 2010, where we had a ADAS retrofit product ahead of proliferating our consumer vehicle ADAS products. Very similar practice, including regulatory discussion, including product fit, product optimization. We want to know our customer's problem when we design our offering. And that's what we do by capturing the entire chain as a first step. Mass plays a crucial role in shaping self-driving systems as a commercial product, as we said, battle testing and certifying technology globally, gaining regulatory and market credibility, cardinal data generator to fuel the future advances of this industry, as I mentioned earlier, with the traffic market. First step is optimizing the product fit. Second element of it is co-optimization. That's what I hinted at when I said that we can facilitate a better crosstalk between the value nodes in this mobility as a service chain by having oversight of the full vertical stack and addressing the consumer in the end of it. Let's look at it in a closer look. That's what we'll do in the next few slides. So mass layers and crosstalk. First of all, what are the value and cost determinants of success in this market? Value determinants, you want to optimize your service levels and ETAs. You want to give a rich and comfortable and psychological safety to Jack's talk earlier today. Psychological safety experience to the rider inside. And as for cost determinants, these are the hardware costs of vehicle and self-driving system, capital utilization, how do you match your demand and supply optimally, how do you manage the fleet, utilize your capital to the best way possible, efficient teleoperation support. The number of teleoperation, we'll talk about that later in a second, teleoperation people responding to exceptions of your self-driving system needs to be low in a sense that if you have one teleoperation per 100 vehicles or one teleoperation person per 1,000 vehicles, you improve your case dramatically. And the mixed fleet burdens, which we will talk about later in a second. The layers that we like to describe this value chain by are the self-driving system, the self-driving vehicles, the fleet operations layer, mobility intelligence. Mobility intelligence is the core of making sure that we utilize these assets, these self-driving vehicles in the best way possible in face of the demand. We'll talk about that later along. And service and in-ride experience layers. The implication or the significance of the self-driving system characteristics in shaping each of these layers is immense. Okay? Self-driving systems dictate or require certain interfaces, installation constraints, connectivity, homologation or certification criterias, safety schemes to be joined with our safety scheme and what's called technical or functional safety concept of the vehicle. As for fleet operations, they have immense role in providing diagnostics as to the state and the health of the self-driving capability, the maintenance steps needed given that there is a self-driving system in the car, and repair in case needed. The mobility intelligence layer, as said, a very critical layer, has to be in a crosstalk with the self-driving system development offline and online in real time. So supported operational domain, real-time diagnostics of what's going on in the vehicle at this point exactly, and HD map status and growth. Where is it going to grow? Whether this street was updated just 10 minutes ago or not. Maybe there is a time limit that we should demand, and robotaxis will demand in order to drive a vehicle on a street. This plays very tightly with our RAM mapping technology. Service and in-ride experience, as I said, translating the technical safety into psychological safety. That's part of the experience. ETA estimations in real time, and go-to-market strategies that fit our operational domain to maximize our utilizations. We'll look at the different layers just more carefully a bit now. The self-driving system cardinal differentiation pivots were mentioned several times. I'll just echo them once again. As for IQ chip, we get overall hardware costs and power consumption advantages. Power consumption is not just a cute feature. There are systems of hundreds of kilowatts that are draining the batteries and shortening the ranges of vehicles. 40%. This is a figure. So operating on much lower power consumption profiles is a key cost and value determinant. REM, seamless, the ability to have a seamless, selective geographic scaling of our service shortens the ramp up dramatically in any geography that we choose. RSS caters for the technical and psychological safety and ride duration. RSS enables the agility that you have all experienced here today. The agility of the vehicle, we can measure it, we can quantify it compared to the time a human would have driven that route. We are not far off, unlike other figures that we're hearing out there. True redundancy is essential for the validation costs. The validation costs, as Amnon explained in detail, are dramatically reduced as a result of this philosophy, and allows us to generalize to new geographies and ramp up in those geographies much more quickly than any other approach to the problem. Teleoperation, still within the self-driving system, it's a very tightly linked layer of the self-driving system. We reach edge cases of the sorts that you can see on these pictures, some accident or an emergency vehicle that we detected, or a hole in the road that we see up front. We provide a real-time data feed to a back office. We can optimize the data that we want to provide based on the perception of the vehicle and save on costs in those areas, and get back policy interventions or approval or confirmation for policy proposals, which is the way that we're going about that problem. This is very tightly linked, primary and essential SDS extension by regulation. It's tightly coupled. Operators to cars ratio is a key cost efficiency factor, and incident response and resolve time in case a rider is in the vehicle while you are there is going to be a key value determinant. Self-driving vehicles, we are of course not going to build a vehicle. We are interfacing with that industry very intimately for many years now and will continue to do so. There are very effective solutions being built. We are engaged to make sure that these solutions, which put emphasis on redundancy, user experience infrastructure, safety and security, availability in terms of downtime, vehicle lifetime with a goal of 1 million kilometer, and costs per passenger kilometer, amortization of that vehicle needs to go down. These vehicles are being shaped. By the way, it's not really highlighting the drive performance. That's not what it's about. That's the least of the trouble. So leveraging our well-established automotive industry position and partnerships to affirm design fit and timely SDV supply opportunities are ahead of us. We're locking them in. I skipped fleet operations for a purpose because we will understand one exotic topic about it after we understand mobility intelligence. So mobility intelligence takes into account ride request, a model of the fleet, the vehicles of the fleet, where are dispersed, the situation of those vehicles, maintenance schedule. They take into account information about the environment, environmental model, what goes out there, current and predicted traffic, map and city planning, where should we expect events of exception, and weather data. These are all provided into the mobility intelligence module to maintain two very important models, to sustain two very important, very useful models. Customer utility function, what are the elasticities of customers given wait time, price, pickup, drop-off in case of pooling. Pooling will not necessarily take all passengers from origin to destination. There will be some walk 20 meters in order to catch a 50% cheaper ride. That's very appealing, but you want to understand elasticities there as well. The demand prediction is probably the core of that intelligence. You want to be able to predict the patterns of demand on their cadences, so you can prepare your fleet dispersion as you go about it. You can go to that next expected ride with your vehicle's placement around the space. The output is, of course, maintaining service levels, optimal service levels, optimizing the utilization of your capital, of your assets, of your vehicles traveling around, and tapping into value pricing when possible. The anecdotal problem, fleet operation is a well-commoditized industry. It needs to be, as I said, more brought up to operate a fleet of autonomous vehicles. This is slightly a different problem, but the economies of it are very fairly commoditized. We know we can get those as a service. There is one aspect of it which is the mixed fleet problem. Mixed fleet problem is stemming from the fact that at first stages, while the ODD is being broadened in a certain geography and during the ramp-up phase, drives outside that ODD must be referred to human drivers.
Fleet optimization, demand analysis, route optimization, teleoperations. Here we have a very detailed landscape of possible partners, from startups to bigger companies who are engaging with them. Some of those components we'll build ourselves, some of those components we will partner. But the important part of it is that we'll have complete oversight of the entire chain. Because if you want to get the benefit from the top layer, which is the service layer, the mobility marketplace, the traffic marketplace, you should have oversight of all the components. It does not mean that you need to make everything yourselves. You can partner with others, and we plan to do that. We are not yet ready to go and announce with whom we are partnering, but it will unfold over time. But we don't see ourselves partnering with one big company. We do partners for the components that we need.
All right, I just ask everybody to try to limit yourself to one question given the limited time we have with the execs, so thank you.
Thanks, I had like 5. This is Dan Gals from Wolf Research. I guess I wanted to ask about L2 Plus. I think you've made the case that what's called L2 or L2 Plus today is not going to really resemble what's going to be L2 Plus a couple of years from now, and safety could be a big component of that jump ahead. I was wondering if you could talk, if you would be willing to share the value per unit that Mobileye could achieve from an L2 Plus unit a couple or 3 years from now, and also if safety is really going to be almost to the level of an autonomous vehicle with L2 Plus. Is there a path to see L2 Plus incorporated into NCAP regulations in the future?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting, direction to talk about. We see this field driven by 2 revolutions, and normally people mix those 2 revolutions into one bucket. We see a revolution of saving lives, and we see a revolution of disrupting transportation. Normally, when you think about autonomous cars, you kind of mix those 2 revolutions, because if all cars are autonomous, obviously you save lives, because those cars would be involved in much less accidents than humans, and of course you disrupt transportation, all the talk that Erez gave. But the way we look at it, we see those 2 revolutions driven by 2 different areas of our spectrum. Saving lives is driving assist. You don't need full autonomy in order to reach a horizon, reach a future in which accidents become very, very rare. And I actually published a paper about that half a year ago, which we called it Vision Zero. So what we did, take the vehicle that you have driven today, powered only by cameras. It's a $1,000 bill of material. In volume, it's going to be a few hundred dollars. If we can take this setup and create a theory that will prove that if all cars have this setup, the probability of an accident will be infinitesimal, then this would drive regulation to go and incentivize car makers to have a full surround camera system in order to prevent accidents. And the way we look at it is the difference between an emergency system compared to a preventive system. Today, AEB, the technology for preventing collisions, is an emergency system. You have to be in an imminent collision before it kicks in, and then it's an emergency braking. Right? So it's very rare. A preventive system is stability control. Stability control, the system doesn't wait until you skid. It will prevent you from skidding to begin with. So now if you are a race driving, it's annoying, right? So you shut it off. But normal people don't even notice that they're being limited, right? The brakes are applied gently to prevent them from skidding. So the way we see this, we can take driving assist into a preventive mode. Given our RSS methodology, given the fact that the car sees 360 degree, the car can apply the brakes gently and the steering gently to prevent you from entering into a dangerous situation to begin with. And then given the theory of RSS, which comes with guarantees, it says that if all cars would comply with this model, there will be no accidents, unless there are failures. There will be no accidents. The same thing we can say about driving assist. If all cars would have the surround computer vision with this RSS model inside in a preventive mode, we can then guarantee there will be no accidents or infinitesimal level of accidents. So we see, and of course that will make the TAM of driving assist much bigger, because now you're not just having a front-facing camera, you have surround cameras. It will save much more lives than driving assist saves today, and it's completely separate from the autonomous revolution. The autonomous revolution, really, the promise of autonomy is the disruption of transportation. The fact that you're increasing the utilization of cars to a degree in which much fewer cars needs to roam the streets, less parking lots, much more efficient mobility, traffic market of traffic, market of mobility. All this is a huge disruption, has nothing to do with saving lives. Saving lives is driving assist. And this is what we're pushing through, taking these technologies, demonstrating them to regulatory bodies, and push the regulation of driving assist towards this horizon. And that, of course, will increase the TAM, increase the ASPs, saves more lives, and so forth. And that's under level 2+, because the driver is responsible. The driver is driving.
That's Joe Moore from Morgan Stanley. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about IQ5 in the context of, the world has sort of shifted to a neural network approach to solving these computer vision analytic problems. You alluded to that a little bit. Also, Intel's owned you guys, since you started developing that product. So how much different is the architecture as you shift from IQ4 to IQ5, and how hard is it just to move this software over? I know it's been going on over a long time, but just a little bit of insight into how much of a transition this is going to be.
So first, I didn't specify what these IQ chips are. So an IQ chip it has CPU cores and it has accelerators. But unlike other chips in which the accelerators are driven by one big technology like GPU technologies, we have a number of different accelerator families, and they span the compute density from neural networks to multi-threaded operations to there are a lot of different workloads. Not all the workloads are deep networks. Not all the workloads are convolutional networks. There are many different workloads that you need to support when you're doing a computer vision that captures all the richness of computer vision. And our design of our accelerators, we have 4 families of accelerators, span this compute density of all those workloads. This is why our chip is very, very efficient. Just to give you an idea, in terms of the IQ5 silicon area, it's a 7 nanometer. It's about 45 millimeters square. Compare that to competing chips, which are hundreds of millimeters square. So its cost, its power consumption, and the workload that we can put on an IQ5. So all the experience that you have had today, it's a single IQ5 chip. Single IQ5 chip. So this gives us a lot of leverage. Leverage in terms of cost, in terms of power consumption. We can put this chip behind the windscreen because of the power consumption. 2021, some of the design wins with IQ5 is behind the windscreen. There's no other chip of that magnitude in terms of computing power that you can put behind a windscreen. And IQ6 is taking this even further. It's a bigger chip. The IQ6 is not going to be behind the windscreen. The idea of the IQ6 is to bring us to the 2025 consumer AV. Instead of multiple IQ5s that will power autonomous car, it will be a single IQ6, and this is how we're going to bring the cost of a self-driving system to around $4,000.
I mean, I think that description alone just talks about the kinds of workloads that we're seeing in AI and why there is no one answer. It's not like you can just say, hey, we're just going to put a GPU into the process and solve all these problems. The workloads are so discrete nowadays, and the types of technologies you have to be able to integrate are becoming more and more diverse.
Hi, I'm Barish with BMO. I had a question on the REM approach. Can you just help us identify a little bit more the differentiation with your approach? And I get it seems very intuitive with the install base and the presentation that was held earlier on with the amount of regions that you already mapped. But there's a lot of other solutions that are out there. So if you could just go in a little bit more detail on how you differentiate, not just in terms of the crowdsourcing approach. And then second part, kind of related to that is, you laid out many revenue streams, but if you think about as you get a lot more install base using REM, does that show into the revenues over the next 2 to 3 years, and what's the revenue share model on that? Thank you.
So in terms of mapping, the REM technology is very unique. There isn't anything comparable to it. So to make this point clear, let's talk about what is the alternative, how people build maps today. So when you're talking about map, you need the map data, which has to be very detailed, much more detailed than a navigation map. This is one element. And the second element is localization. You need to localize yourself inside that map at an accuracy of centimeters. Now, a GPS cannot give you that accuracy. So you need to localize using other means. So how it is done today, you drive a car with a LiDAR, 360-degree spinning LiDAR. At every instance, you have a 3D cloud of points. Right? Now, those you store those 3D clouds of points for every instance. Say 10 frames per second, every frame you have 3D cloud of points. Now, this is stored in disk or in memory. Now you drive again, and you see again 3D cloud of points, and you do matching between 3D and 3D. And that's how you localize yourself. So in contemporary map making, not only you need to build the maps where the lanes are located and all the information about the semantics of the drivable path and traffic signs, and so all what you need in order to drive, you need to have with this map this 3D cloud of points with you. It's a huge bandwidth. Just storing it is a lot of data. Sending this, it's a lot of data. The REM technology bypasses all of this. It uses a different principle. It uses a principle of landmarks. But now you're recognizing the landmarks. You know that this is a traffic sign of, say, 65 miles per hour. You know that this is a pole. You know that this is a reflector. You know that this is a pavement marking, say, a picture of a bicycle. You recognize. It's not just points. Now, because it is sparse, you know, the poles, the reflectors, the traffic signs, and so forth, the bandwidth is very, very small. As I said, it's 10 kilobytes per kilometer. So now you have the advantage where you solve both the localization and the map data in one scheme based on camera processing. So now Mobileye's advantage is multifold. One, we came up with the idea. Okay. Second, we are really a significant actor in cameras in the car. So even if somebody else comes with this idea, they don't have the asset in the car. You just saw 2019, we shipped 17 million chips. We have 17 million cars with our technology, right? So it puts us in a very good position to take this idea, this technology, and actually make use of it. Somebody else who comes, let's say now a new actor comes in and said, you know, we understood Mobileye's technology, we even improved it. Instead of 10 kilobytes per kilometer, it's going to be 5 kilobytes per kilometer. But they don't have the asset in the car. Replacing us, it's easy to say, but you know, as far as I know, nobody has succeeded in replacing us in the last 15 years, right? Because we're moving ahead of the curve. We're investing a lot in technology, a lot in innovation. You know, making what we do at the quality of what we do is not easy. Right? And this gives us a very, very strong advantage. So it is not that there are many solutions out there. There is none. There is either the manual labor kind of thing of running with a LiDAR, with 3D cloud of points, and then building the maps, semi-manual, and this is good for a geofenced area, or the crowdsourced, which is only us. Okay, so there's not many solutions. It's one solution.
We probably have time for one last question.
Ian Richards, Strategy Analytics. Sorry, this last all the questions being at the high end. I'm going to ask about the low end, so sorry to drag it right down to the bottom at the end. But one of the fastest emerging ADAS markets we see is in very low-end ADAS for emerging economies, low-end cars in China, India. Do you have any interest in that market? Because the prices they're often willing to pay are below where you traditionally have been.
Of course, we have interest. Our intent is to win all business, low end and high end, because if we don't want to put ourselves in a position of a boutique shop where we go only for the high end, somebody else gets the low end, improves over time, and then starts threatening us on the high end. We take everything, whatever the revenue, whatever the profit margin, we take everything. We are very, very active in China. I think we have many tens of percents of market share in China, and it's growing to many more tens of percents. I know exactly the number, but I'm not allowed to say it. So, so we're very, very strong in China, and it is growing. India is a very, very important market for us. We have a design win of about half a year ago with Mahindra & Mahindra, the biggest OEM in India, and we have very, very big plans in ramping up in India. So we are very, very interested in emerging markets. We are very, very interested in the low end, and our success rate in the low end is very, very high.
All right, thank you, George. Thank you, Amnon.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go, I'm told that we actually do have our technical difficulties worked out. We're going to try to make it, yes, thank you for the crossed fingers. We're going to try one more time. Please cue the video.
It was impressive, seeing how it worked, seeing how it was processing things.
See, aren't you glad we waited? All right, for those on the webcast, this concludes our presentation for today. A quick reminder that all of these materials will be posted on intc.com and the Intel Newsroom. Thank you for watching and have a great day.